some of you guys have access to a launch monitor, and if you do, I think it's phenomenal. I had, for 3 years, I hit all of my practice shots indoors on a launch monitor with the same golf ball every time, and I learned a ton about my golf swing. I learned a ton about different golf balls and how they react. So that's great if you've got a launch monitor or if you've got access to a launch monitor. The tough thing is most players don't really know what numbers they're looking for. So I'm just going to touch briefly on this. If you do have a chance to go to a golf shop, or if your buddy's got a launch monitor, or if you can find one, when you hit your shot, the launch angle, the spin, the speed, all that stuff is dependent on your physical kind of ability. So if I'm a tour player, I'm looking for certain launch characteristics. If I'm a guy who has a club head speed around 100, I'm looking for slightly different launch characteristics. So as those change, as our ability changes and our speed changes, our launch characteristics change. So I'm going to go over 3 launch characteristics, and hopefully we'll kind of hit the window that you might be in. So if your club head speed's over about 110, which would put you at kind of the tour average, that's pretty high. Your ball speed's going to be around 165 to 175, depending on how solid you hit it, and depending on the club you use a little bit. But if my club head speed's around 110 miles per hour, I'm looking for almost the highest launch angle I can get with the least amount of spin possible. So if I'm at that range, 110 miles per hour, I might look for a launch angle somewhere definitely over 10 degrees, but somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees, and I'm looking for a spin rate that's under 3,000 revolutions. So if I'm looking at a launch monitor screen and I'm saying, what does all this mean? The first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at speed. My club head speed, if it's 110, I want my launch to be over 10, probably under 15, and I want my spin to be below 3,000. The reason I want my spin to be below 3,000 is because I'm hitting this ball with enough force that I don't need a lot of backspin to keep it in the air. So I want to make sure that this ball launches kind of high and just goes straight for a really long time. So that's my maximum clubhead speed. And if you're a long drive guy and your clubhead speed's 140, you're looking at even less. You're looking at maybe 15-degree launch angle with 2,000 RPMs of spin, and your ball speed's going to be nightmarishly high, somewhere around 190 or 200 miles per hour. But that's not most of us. The next step down from the kind of tour player swing speed average would be a guy whose clubhead speed's around 95 to 100. So if your clubhead speed's around 95 to 100, you actually have an advantage over the tour player. Your advantage is that you're not going to hit it as far. And that may not seem like a major advantage, but if you think about what a fairway looks like, if I'm looking at it from kind of like a helicopter view, I'm looking down at this fairway. If I hit a shot that's 5 degrees offline and it goes 240 yards, it might still be in the fairway, where a shot that goes 300 might go just that extra 50 yards farther is going to put it in the left trees or the water or the rough. So you're actually in a pretty good spot if your clubhead speed's around 95 or 100. The launch characteristics you're looking for when you're looking at that launch monitor, you're looking for somewhere around 10 to 13 degrees of launch, and you're looking for somewhere around 2,500 RPMs of backspin all the way up to around 3,500. And it's really not going to kill you to have that high a backspin unless you start getting a really big axis of rotation shift, or if your ball really has kind of that curve element to it. And hopefully if you've been working on the square-to-square swing, you've taken some of your curve out of your shot. But again, if you're in that 95 to 100 mile per hour swing speed, and your ball speed's somewhere around 140 to potentially even 150 if you really hit it solidly, your launch angle that you're looking for is going to be somewhere, again, in that 10 to 13 degree range, and we want to keep our spin under 3,500 and over that 2,300 RPMs. We're looking for about 2,500 to 3,500 RPMs. That's kind of the sweet spot where we're going to get the most out of our golf ball. If we're lower than that, if we're in the 80 clubhead speed range, and there are a lot of guys out there that are in that 80 clubhead speed range, now we have so much to work with. We can hit a really low shot with a lot of spin. We can hit a high shot with a lot of spin, a medium shot with medium spin. We can pretty much hit anything because our ball's not spending so much time in the air and it's not getting killed by a ton of wind resistance. So you'll see a lot of guys that have been playing a long time and they may not have a lot of clubhead speed and they hit this really low, boring shot. And we look at that and we're like, wow, that's not going to go very far. But when you see it, it hits and it runs and it rolls forever. That kind of shot is actually really useful. You can throw away all of the optimal launch conditions when you're talking about that lower club head speed, because unless it's wet out, a lower shot with lower speed is actually going to roll pretty good for you. If we were going to say absolute optimal in that lower club head speed range, we probably want to launch it somewhere between, I'd say between 9 and 13 or 9 and 14 degrees. Not too far off from the other ones, but our spin rate could be much higher. We don't have to worry too much about eliminating spin at that club head speed, because since the ball's leaving the club face a lot slower, it's leaving around 120 to 130 miles per hour, the ball's leaving and it's taking off and it's going through the wind, but it doesn't have enough force to really stay on a trajectory for very long unless it has some backspin. So we kind of need that backspin to stay in the air a long time when we're swinging at those slower clubhead speeds. But again, if I'm looking at a player and their clubhead speed's around 75 or 80, I'm not that concerned with finding the optimal launch conditions for that player, because in reality, the difference that it's going to make in the long run, it could be maybe 10 yards or something like that. But in different conditions, it may not even really matter. So again, really high clubhead speeds, we want to get a really high launch angle, somewhere between 13 and 15 degrees with a really low launch angle number, with a really low spin rate, somewhere around 2,000 to 2,500 RPMs. And then as we go down the list, we can kind of lower the launch angle a little bit and increase the backspin a little bit. And those things kind of go together hand in hand. So next time you're hitting a driver and you're at a golf shop, or you're hitting on your buddy's launch monitor and you just want to know what these numbers mean for your driver, think about that range, kind of between 10 and 15 degrees of launch. And depending on your speed, you're looking at either a really low spin rate, like 2,000 if you've got a lot of clubhead speed, or even up to 3,500 or 4,000 if you've got a really low clubhead speed.